Hey, dear listeners, real quick before we get into the episode, I wanted to talk about the game Persona 5 and it's dealing with the topics of sexual abuse. Now, me and Adam recognize that this is a pretty sensitive topic. It's something that can be very intense for some people. And so we wanted to do a few things at the start of this episode. And one of the things is to make you, the listener, aware that this discussion does come up during the spoiler discussion of the game. So if that is a topic that is very intense for you or is just very upsetting, then we would encourage you to either skip past that part or to just avoid this episode altogether. But one of the other things we wanted to do is we recognize that this is an issue that probably some of our listeners do face. And so we are including links into the show notes and into the description bar on YouTube, links to different hotline numbers that you can call, that you can reach out to get help. If you are in that situation of sexual abuse or abuse of any sort, please reach out. Know that you are not alone and know that there are people ready and willing to help you through this. And also, just as a encouragement to you, please reach out to your local pastor at your church, reach out to authorities. Just know you do not have to remain powerless in that situation, and you can overcome this and you can get out of that. So we wanted to make that known at the top of the episode. And without further ado, let's jump into Persona 5. Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 109 of The Reformed Gamers, the show all about theology, video games, becoming the Phantom Thieves, and anything else that we can think of. I'm your senpai host, Logan.
And I am his co-host, Adam.
Adam, what is a senpai?
A lot of the terminology used in this game, Persona 5, that we will be discussing today, I have no idea what they're talking about.
I don't either. I just realized that, like...
I'm assuming it's like friend or teacher or something like that.
Is it? Huh. I just realized, like, I've been using it this entire time, and I don't think I even know what it means. So for all I know, I could have been calling people dirty words.
I think they do a lot of the, like, terms of endearment. I feel like that's with, like, my guy's name was Maximus, so it's like Max Coon.
Max Coon.
And so... like K-U-N. So I don't know if those are like terms of endearment maybe of some sort, but no idea. I just roll with it.
I'm going to Google senpai right now. Oh, it means teacher or master.
There you go.
Oh, so I have been using it correctly.
There you go.
That makes me feel better.
I am a teacher of sorts.
True story. You and I both are senpais in our own right. You know? That's what I'm going to call myself in video games from now on, senpai. Because that's just...
It's a new change.
It's what?
From the theologian to some sort of senpai gamer tag name.
I've got to figure out a way to work that in there. Dear listener supreme, Wesley Ray, figure that out for me, man. Let me know. He's the one that came up with the theologian for me, and I'm like, dude, this guy.
Yep.
He's smart. He is smart. But speaking of awesome people, speaking of rad dear listeners and things of that nature, guess what? Lee Peng, you won Cuphead from our last episode, our 3-year anniversary episode. Congratulations to you. I know you posted in the Facebook group, so hey, just reach out to us via private messenger. Yeah, PM us, DM us, whatever, on Facebook, and we'll get you the code. Actually, just check your DMs, because I'll send you the code, and then there you go. You can enjoy Cuphead for PC. As far as the other winners go, you'll just have to keep listening. We're going to spread them out throughout the episode, so that way you listen to it. Now, you might be wondering, well, wait a minute. What if I haven't played Persona? Huh? What if I haven't played Persona? You want me to listen to this entire episode of this game I didn't play and I have no desire to play? Chill out. Just wait till what you've been reading in Reco's. There, I'm helping you out. But I'm not going to say anything else beyond that. Nope.
You've said too much already.
I've said too much already. Adam is furious, apparently. Adam, Adam. Good sir. Persona 5. It's a long time
5.
coming, man.
It only took me how long? That game came out when?
It's almost been a year now, I think, isn't it?
No, I think it took me like 6 months.
I think the game came out. I don't know. Dear listeners, someone correct me on it.
It's not been a year. We should have that in our notes somewhere.
I feel like it has.
It's like 6 months, I don't think. But either way, I beat it quicker than I thought I would.
How many hours?
Way faster than Persona 4. That is true.
How many hours?
Mine was only 80 because I didn't do the true ending.
Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me about that because you saw an off ramp and you took it.
I took the off ramp, similar to Persona 4. Took the off ramp and then I went back and watched the last little bit, which is kind of cheap. You know, you put in 80 hours, you're like, well, what's 10 more? But when I get to the end of games, I'm just like, all right, I see the finish line. Let's cross this so I can get on to the next one. And yeah, that was me with Persona 4 and 5.
Fair enough.
But we'll talk Persona later. We'll talk Persona later.
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, well, let's just get into it, man. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rambling on and make it awkward for everybody else, like the youth pastor that I am. So, without further ado, dear listeners, hello and welcome to the Reformed Gamers. I almost went through the whole spiel like I did at the beginning of the show. Words are hard. Welcome to the Reformed Gamers. We like to start the show like we always do with a little bit of what we've been playing and a little bit of what we've been reading. And Adam, you baby daddy, what have you been playing?
Parenthood has been good. Let me just give a quick inlet into that. God has been so good. The baby that he has given us she is a rock star. Thank you also to you and Camilla for the baby stuff. Huge shout out. Truly appreciate your guys' love for our family. But she's been sleeping, which has kind of been, I was anticipating getting some great daddy-daughter time where, okay, Hannah, you go to bed. I'll stay up from 12 to 2 a.m. with her when she's awake, and I'm going to get some gaming in. But she's been sleeping so well, big problem. She sleeps too good where I haven't had to, stay up late nights with her and play video games. So video games has, fallen down a little bit, but we're figuring out the schedule. I blame that more on my wife than on the baby. So, but been playing some Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I know you'll probably want to jump in on this discussion a little bit because I'm at a point where I have paused or /shelved Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I played it. I had just finished chapter 4, so I think that's where you were. And I said, okay, I'm still really enjoying this. I could continue, but one of the Nintendo Direct had come out with a lot of the little indie things talking about Mario Odyssey. So I'm like, I'm going to come back to it. So I paused that, picked up Mario Odyssey. And let me talk about Mario Odyssey, and then, or maybe we'll talk Xenoblade when we get back around to you, because I know you have a lot to say about it. But I picked Mario Odyssey back up, and I enjoy Mario Odyssey, but the more I play it, the more I'm like, I am okay with not 100% completing this game.
Same here, man.
There's too much.
Yeah.
All of the different stars, I feel like I've done a lot, and I know that Mario, there's just kind of random stars and moons or whatever in this one, and that's kind of a part of it's just what it's always been. But when I came back to it, I had 400 and maybe 430, 420 moons. And I'm like, all right, I want to get the 500 so I can do the darker side of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up getting to a point where I'm like, I don't even really care to do that anymore. I ended up buying enough stars, so I got to the darker side of the moon, but I'm okay with setting it down. It's not something that with Zelda, when I got back into it the second time to go do a lot of the shrines, I was hooked again. It was like it was all over again. I was addicted. I was playing it for long stretches. But Mario, it almost felt like a workout picking it up to play it. And so I definitely, looking back on discussions about Game of the Year, again, really good game, and I really enjoyed it, but it's not a game where I feel like I don't know how much more I'll come back to it. And that's unfortunate because it is a great game. It's beautiful. There's a lot going on, but for me, it's just too much going on. So That's where I'm at with Mario Odyssey. I started also with putting down of Xenoblade Chronicles. I picked up Wolfenstein 2, and I'd had it, but I finally put it in my PlayStation and started playing it. And that game is good. It is. If you liked Wolfenstein 1, if you liked the Old Blood, you will like Wolfenstein 2. It's got the story is really interesting here on the front end. It picks up right on right after the original. There's a little bit of time because there's some recovery for the main character, but it kind of picks up right after, so that's super interesting. The gunplay is still fantastic. You've got great shooting mechanics. I'm playing on, there's like 5 difficulty levels. Definitely like Wolfenstein 2. It's got a lot of the similar aspects. It picks up the story right after Wolfenstein 1. And so if you like that, it kind of continues that. It gives a little bit of a backstory to BJ Blazkowicz, the main character. But, I mean, just a lot of the similar aspects. Great gunplay, very interesting story. You always hate the antagonists in these Wolfenstein games. So I'm probably 6 hours or so in. And I haven't been playing it as much as I would like, or as much as I probably should, because I'm still playing that Fortnite.
Oh my gosh, here we go.
Logan, have you played Fortnite yet?
I finally played it, and I really don't see what all the hubbub's about.
Oh my gosh, this game, I enjoy it so much. Like I told you before the show, I'm kind of some of my students are trying to sell their Xbox Ones, and so I'm trying to get them to sell it to me for cheap so I can play Fortnite with some other students in the dorm that have Xbox Ones, and also for PUBG, try that out. But they just did a major update the other day, and this game has got, again, it's a free game. The Battle Royale is free, and the amount of support that they keep putting into it, they're constantly, I think like every week or every other week, they're patching it. So they've improved the gunplay. They just added a lot of different areas on the map. It's a great game to play with other people. Like I haven't been a multiplayer gamer for a while where I'm constantly trying to get on. But this is a game I will only play with people and with my students. I'm not really a one-on-one guy. So I've got a couple wins the past week with some guys. So it's such a fun game. Like I keep coming back to it. I was sitting there yesterday and I'm like, I should totally be playing Wolfenstein 2. But I know there's some students I'm playing Fortnite, and I just want to get on there and try to get some wins. And so I love this game. It's just so much fun to me. I can understand why everybody loves PUBG. Mm-hmm. They're similar but different, but just that battle royale feel. Fortnite is, the more and more I play it, the more I just continue to enjoy it. And I'm nice not being the worst player on my team, holding my own and carrying some of that. But yeah, I probably need to set it down a little bit so I can get back into Wolfenstein 2. I'd like to get back into Xenoblade, but I'd also like to start Stardew Valley. But I feel like that's going to be a hard balance between, a 70 to 90 hour Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and then Stardew Valley, which I hear is a good beefy game, depending on how you play it. So
you're better off to finish one of those first, because Stardew Valley just is going to eat up so much of your free time, man.
Yeah. So I'll probably jump back into Xenoblade just because that story is kind of all over the place and intricate, and you want it fresh.
True.
So I'll probably jump back into that, but I've been trying to balance my gameplay between afternoon nap and trying to, now that Hannah's not working anymore, she's around. Mm-hmm. So I try not to, normally I don't play a bunch when she's around, but she also knows that video games is kind of my mental relaxer in the afternoons, and I would usually play that when she was at work. So she's been really gracious.
That's good.
But trying to just figure out that time management now that she's always home with the baby, and it's just nice. I can lay baby Ren on my chest and hold a controller really easily. So it just kind of works.
That's awesome, man. And soon enough, she'll be playing games with you, so you'll have a Fortnite.
I know. I've been saying she's going to be a baller and a gamer. She's going to be my little gamer girl. I can't wait.
There you go. Oh, man. So I'm not going to start with Xenoblade just yet. I'm going to kind of wrap up my journey with Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice that I just now noticed I misspelled in our show notes, but whatever. Finished the game. Fantastic game. Easily one of the best games of 2017. It's just, I mean, dear listeners, you guys have heard me talk about it for the past couple episodes. You know what I think about the game. The ending just kind of solidified all that, and it was just a very beautiful ending. It's just, I'm getting into spoiler territory, but I kind of don't care. It was just a very beautiful ending. Very beautiful ending. I found myself just weeping and in tears when the credits were rolling. It was just so good, and so good that I even got the platinum trophy for it. So I started off 2018 was with that there. Fantastic game, dear listeners. It's going to be an early Reco. Oh, I guess I do have a Reco this week. Early Reco for this episode is Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. Now, again, with a little caveat to that, look it up online, watch some Let's Plays, read some parental guides and things of that nature, so that way you can determine for yourself if it's a game that you personally can handle. Now, again, the game is rated M for mature, so sorry, teenagers that listen to the show, you're already excluded from the game. But those of you that are over 17, check the game out, see what you think. If it's a game you think you can play, go for it. If it's not, again, don't worry about it. You don't need to play everything. So, going off of that over to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's interesting, Adam, that you said that you shelved the game, because I've actually abandoned it.
No.
Yeah. Did you just fall down a pit?
Yes.
This is a very deep pit. I'm still falling. Gosh, I can't remember what movie that. Oh, it's Moana. Anyway, so after talking last episode about this game and just kind of thinking over it, looking at the game and just looking at my time clock and just considering that in light of just everything else I have going on, I decided I can't put any more time into this game. I don't care about the story. I hate all of the characters. The combat just feels like a chore at this point. And I really don't care what happens in this story. And so I've officially abandoned Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And I think at this point, I'm just not going to play Xenoblade games anymore, because I didn't enjoy X and I didn't really enjoy Chronicles 2. So I think I'm just done with the series at this point. I mean, I don't want to risk playing another entry in the series and just absolutely hating it and being like, okay, I just wasted another 30,
unless
40
you
hours.
find out that a lot of things have been changed. You know, sometimes they take totally new directions, but
True.
Again, if you're not enjoying a game, we've talked about this before, we only have limited time. Yeah. So if you're done with it, be done with it. I mean, a lot of things that you mentioned are things that I still enjoy. Like, I enjoy the gameplay probably because it's not super demanding. I can like fight some people and let some of the auto attacks and stuff kind of as I either grind or do some side missions and whatnot. So the story and some of the characters are annoying, but overall I'm still into it. So yeah, I don't blame you, because if it's not for you, that why play another potential 30 to 40 hours of a game that you're not enjoying. But yeah, it's unfortunate. I wish you liked it more, no doubt.
Me too. I mean, I was hyped for it. I wanted to pick it. I wanted to really enjoy it, but it is what it is. So, but I will say that sometimes you play a game and you hate it, right? But after you finish it, there's something where you just start thinking about it more and more, and you're like, maybe I'll go back and give it another shot, see what I think. And that game for me is Fury, which is a game that, dear listeners, if you have a PS4, you probably got it for free during PS Plus a year or two ago, so you might have it already. But it's a game put out by, I think the developers are called the Game Bakers. Jeff Simmons, who we had on several episodes ago, actually did some of the music for this game. And I finished the game on easy mode, right? And when you play in easy mode, you don't get any trophies, okay? So basically what the game is, if you haven't seen it, dear listeners, check our YouTube channel out on Wednesday. I'll upload a video or two of me streaming it to Twitch. It's a series of boss fights, essentially. You go back to back to back to back to just doing boss fights, and they change up depending on the fights, and some are crazy hard, some are actually a little bit easy. It just depends on the boss. But really, cool game in terms of art and music, really good stuff, but the combat takes some getting used to. You really got to get used to it. So all that to say, I played through the game on easy to get used to the enemies, how they fight, their moves, my own character's moves, and how those things work together. And I basically decided it was a very pretentious game that I hated, right? So I decided I'm not going to play this game again. So I deleted it off of my PlayStation 4. But I kept thinking about it. I'm like, well, I could get better at it. There's something about how bad is regular? I'm curious because I read online there's not much of a difference between easy and regular. So I downloaded the game again and got hooked. I think I've beaten the game 2 or 3 times now between my PS4 and Switch. I bought it for Switch also. And yeah, dude, I dig that game. It ain't for everybody. It's got its issues. I'll openly admit that. But man, that game is so much stinking fun with I like the challenge now that I know what I'm doing. But I think for a lot of people who are going to try this game out first, like this is going to be like their first time with the game, it's going to be incredibly intimidating and really difficult. So all that to say, dear listeners, it is a game that I really enjoy. You can check out our YouTube channel for some videos of the different boss fights and some tips I'll throw out there on our YouTube channel this Wednesday. So depending on when you're listening to this episode, just go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thereformedgamers, and see if we have any videos uploaded, and you can see for yourself. But I think it's worth trying. Just, see if you dig it, give it a shot, and if you don't like it, move on to another game. But I'm digging it because I don't know what it is, man. I've been craving a good challenge in the games.
Tell you what, you have. You're ridiculous right now. I'm like, I tried Fury. I was one of those guys that when we got it for free, I tried it out. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, all right. It looks cool, but this isn't what I'm looking to play.
Yeah.
And so knowing you're playing that and what you're about to talk about next, like you are on some sort of kick.
Yeah, man. And that other game that I'm about to bring up is Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin. And I don't know what it is, man, but I love the challenge both these games are giving me. See, here's the thing, is I played Neo, right? I finally put some time into Neo. I beat it thanks to some of the guys in the group, the Dear Listener Supremes. And overall, by the time I finished that game, I decided I hate Neo. It is so cheap. There's so much going on that I really just don't care for it. The enemies move too fast. It stresses me out. It makes me real angry, and I'm about to break my controller. I don't want to play this anymore. But I remember what game I played that was kind of difficult, but it didn't really make me want to break my controller, and that was Dark Souls 2. I put an hour into it a couple years ago, didn't touch it since then, so I picked it back up on the PS4, put a good amount of time into it the other day, and dude, I'm loving it. It's got some challenge, but man, it's like a game of chess that I can actually play. It's at my own perfect pace. It's not super fast like Neo is. There's not really a whole lot of complex technical game mechanics going on that I got to keep track of. It's perfect. And I love it. It's so much fun. And I don't know what it is, man. It's weird because I remember talking several episodes ago about how I don't like to play games that are really difficult anymore. Yet here I am playing Fury and Dark Souls 2 and soon to be Dark Souls 3, which I also picked up during a winter sale. And I don't know what's going on. I've been talking to some other guys in the group, and they're like, Logan, you got your flip-flops on, man. Your bright neon flip-flops. You're flipping, flopping, and back and forth and going crazy. You should have your own sitcom where you're just flipping and flopping every single minute. So, I don't know what's going on. But I'm having a blast with Fury, having a blast with Dark Souls 2. I don't know what's going on. But I do know that I'm enjoying it, having a lot of fun. So, that's what I've been playing. But nice. We also talk about what we've been reading. We like to make time for reading books. We don't always game on the show. So, Adam, good sir, what have you been reading?
Yeah, so been jumping into the kind of the reading list. So I don't remember if I brought it up last week, but I started or 2 weeks ago. But True Spirituality is kind of the book I'm reading for my job right now by Francis Schaeffer. It's been a really interesting book. The last chapter was just exceptionally well, looking at how everything starts internally and how everything you do, everything you say, all your actions, it all starts internally, and then that overflow into our life, whether that's, of course, like the Bible says, with your words, with your actions, and even looking at how God in creation. Like, things didn't just happen. No, God thought these things. He thought through these things and then created them. And so that it was just really good. And then even looking at how that flows to communication and interaction with people, and how things just don't necessarily just happen. Like, some scientists, I would say that everything doesn't have purpose. It's just like protons and neutrons interacting. They might say some of these crazy things, but how, using marriage as an example, like, marriage is more than just physical contact. Like thoughtless physical contact. No, it's the communication side that makes a marriage a marriage. If it's just a physical side, then it's mechanical. There's no relationship. It's like, no, but because of the way we communicate, the way we talk, that's what makes it a relationship, is that communication side, that internal processing, and then external action. So been really good. Looked at another point that really stuck out to me in the last couple of weeks, looking at how, yes, we are saved by grace through faith, but faith isn't our foundation. Our foundation is still the cross of Christ and the accomplished work of Christ on the cross. Like, our faith is in the cross. It's not in something else. And so yes, while he would say that faith is the instrument in which we are saved, it is on the foundation of the accomplished work of Christ on the cross. And so just some of those little realizations, because sometimes I think if it's something to get caught up on, saved by grace through faith is something really good too. But we need to make sure that, again, as we recognize that it is in the work and the completed work of Jesus Christ. So really good. I've got, I don't know, maybe 4 chapters left in that book. Been enjoying it. Have you ever read any Francis Schaeffer?
I want to say I have. I mean, I've definitely heard the name. I've seen some of the books, but I can't say for sure if I've read any of his stuff. Sounds fascinating, though.
Yeah, this is the first Francis Schaeffer book I've ever written. I'm sure a lot of our listeners they probably know a lot more of his other stuff. But as we all say with games, there's only so much you can play and there's only so much you can read. And so this is my first time getting into his stuff. But so far, so good. Also, in my quiet time, as I've adapted to this, parenting life, like, I had been consistent for a while, but now that I've got meetings with students, I'm like, I've got to figure out a better way of getting in the Word, because it's, Hannah's been great about getting up in the night, so I don't have to, because she knows I have 8 and 9 o'clock meetings a lot of days. So I've been trying to get up when I get up to get ready to take care of the baby, feed her, change her, and that's just made it hard to get in the Word. So I did it this morning. I think it's going to be as I'm feeding her, as I'm changing her and showering. I think I'm going to start listening to my daily readings. And so I really enjoyed it this morning, and even just sticking out as I was in first Samuel, I think it was chapter 3, where they're looking at Hannah, and it was actually the sons of, at this point, it's the sons of Eli, and they're talking about, if you sin against man, you have an intercessor. But if you sin against God, who can intercede for you? And I was just, it just got me thinking, well, only God can intercede for us when we sin against God. And so just a good moment this morning of reflection on Christ interceding on our behalf, both on the cross and even now as Christians, on our behalf as he, prays for us. So it was just cool, because sometimes I'm afraid of, if I'm just listening to the Bible, am I gonna get as much out of it? Because usually when I'm reading, I'm going at my own speed. I'm not as distracted. But I was really thankful this morning at God just having that one little thought stick out, that one verse stick out to me. So I'm hoping that will be something that can continue really well. And then lastly, second giveaway time. Last episode, we talked about a book I had been reading, Life in the Wild. Again, it comes out on February 1st by Dan DeWitt, a book looking at, life stinks at times, there's suffering in the world, what do we do with it? A biblical approach, very accessible, solid read. We sent out a message last week saying that if you want a chance at winning a free copy of this, tweet out your reading goals for the year, and the winner via Twitter is at @YPastorWolf. Either DM me or are at Reformed Gamers, tag them on Twitter, and so we can get your address and we will get that shipped over to you right away. If you prefer a digital copy, again, you can let us know on that also, and I can try to make that happen. But I'm assuming you prefer physical, and I will have that on your way as soon as I get it from the author Dan DeWitt. So again, check out that book, dear listeners. Life in the Wild comes out here in a couple weeks. I do recommend it. Again, it's an easy, casual read. I think it's, as I think about your youth, Logan, I think that this would be a good book even for your youth group, because it's not some like crazy academic book, but it's founded in the Word. I mean, it's written by the apologetics chair here at Cedarville. Yeah. So I think that might be a book, as you have students, a lot of students and a lot of adults struggle with, if God is so good, why do things suck so bad? Why is there so much suffering? Yeah. This book helps address some of what might be a good resource for even you and
that's good, man.
Some of your youth.
I'm going to be honest with you. Dear listeners know that I'm just a filthy casual. So, I mean, you said it's a casual read. I'm all about casual stuff. So, hey, I'll go ahead and pick that. I'm totally messing, but I will pick that book up. I will check it out. Sounds good. You really did convince me, though, when you said it's a casual read. I'm like, ooh, I'm all about that life. All about that life.
Yeah, it's again, not that we more academia, super deep reads. Again, he's wrestling with scripture, so that's always a positive. But it's not. He's approaching this for college students, high school students, young adults. So he is intentional with not going too academic. And again, I think it's a book that you could give to an unbeliever. It is very much written to Christians, but it is very evangelistic. So if you're like, hey, check this out, I mean, he's breaking down the gospel and talking about how to receive Christ. And so I think someone could read this book at some point. I think that there's no doubt a purpose in that with him being an apologetics professor. I think he's very much trying to make it that way also. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's not finding out that some people are even seeking or coming to Christ through the reading of this book, because he makes it pretty clear.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, as far as what I've been reading then, an update on that book Uninvited by Lisa Turquist that I talked about last episode. And I made mention about how the reviews were kind of all over the place between Goodreads and Amazon. And I finished the book a couple days ago, and I now see why the reviews were kind of all over the place. And it's mainly because the book is a lot like cotton candy. It's great at first, but it quickly dissolves into nothing really substantial. And the problem that I have with the book, and I've said this on my Goodreads review, is that the premise is good. Starting off dealing with things like rejection and anxiety, what does the Bible have to say about this? And I'm like, that's a great question. I'd love to know. But what Lisa really boiled everything down to is just, oh, God loves you, so live in light of that. I'm like, it's true, but it doesn't really help, And the problem with the book is that the entire time it was trying to get you, the reader, to just feel good, to just feel better about yourself, all the while never, ever talking about anything like sin, the gospel, how that affects everything. It never went beyond a surface level depth. And I honestly didn't really like the book. I didn't really care for it. So it's definitely not a Reco. There are some good things in the book, some good quotes, but not enough for anyone to really read through. So, dear listeners, if you come across the book, you don't need to read it. It's not really worth your time. And because I kind of got on this kick, I'm like, I want to read more books written by female authors, especially like biblical stuff. I want to check this stuff out. I want to read it for myself and kind of know. I mean, it's like what you said, Adam. If you're only reading books written by people that are similar to you, you're limiting yourself. So I wanted to kind of push myself a little bit. And so I started reading this book called Redeeming the Feminine Soul by Julie Royce. And I'm a little hesitant to say anything negative about this book because I was checking on my Twitter and noticed she follows me on Twitter. And so I'm like, hopefully she doesn't listen to the podcast. So, I mean, here's my thing with this book, and then I'll get to my last bit here in a second. I didn't like the first half of this book whatsoever. I really felt like here's the premise of the book. she's going out and seeking to figure out, what does the Bible actually teach about femininity? What does the Bible teach about being a woman? What are some biblical things we can look at about being a woman, and how have we gotten this wrong, or how have we gotten this right in years past in church? And I'm like, this is cool. I really like that premise. Let's have that discussion. But what I wasn't exactly prepared for was the first half of the book, and maybe just the first quarter, I think that's a little more accurate. The first half or first quarter of the book seems to be saying, kind of misrepresenting complementarianism in a lot of ways. I can understand how complementarianism, which for you, dear listeners, if you don't know what that is, it's the view that in regards to marriage, God created man and woman equal yet different. And so we have different traits and abilities, and we're built differently in ways that complement one another. And that's just a very brief kind of crash course answer. I really strongly encourage you, dear listeners, to go read this up and study it for yourself. But she misrepresented it in a way that made it seem like complementarianism is bad. Now, I won't sit here and deny that complementarianism has some downfalls to it. People have used it to justify male domination and abuse, but in those instances where jerkwads have done that, that's not really a reflection on complementarianism as a whole, which is how the book words it. And so it was kind of frustrating, because I'm like, it's not really accurate. And part of the problem, I think, with that book is, and dear listeners, this is just a life lesson. It's very important for you to define the words you're using and how you're using them. Otherwise, what often happens is it looks like you're conflating a lot of your words with other things, or you're painting with a broad brush. In this instant here of saying, oh, well, this guy did this and used complementarianism to justify it. You can't take that one anecdotal thing and apply it to everybody, which is what happens in the first part of this book. And it was really frustrating. But the second half of the book is actually really fascinating. It's talking about current issues with feminism and how it hasn't really helped as of the past few decades, and things like that, and how it's just kind of evolved into how it's borderline misogyny in a lot of ways. Really fascinating stuff. So I'll have a more in-depth review next episode after I finish the book. But so far, it's just been it's been a little back and forth for me. So, but has been challenging, which is always good. Now, one thing I want to kind of round this section out with is I started a new devotional, right? I've been looking for devotionals for 2018, trying to find them out. I have nothing against Table Talk, the magazine. I love getting those magazines every month. I'm not really a fan of the devotionals. And so I found this devotional called the 1 Year Daily Moments of Strength Inspiration for Men, that's put out by Tyndale Momentum. And at first I was like, okay, inspiration for men. Is this book just going to make me feel good about myself? Which is fine every now and then, but I don't want just a year's worth of it just trying to make me feel good about myself. I want it to punch me in the gut. That's what I want. And it actually did that. And I really appreciate it. One of the devotions was talking about how if we're to love the Lord our God with all of our mind, then why don't we read? And I'm like, okay, I like where you're going with this. And one of the quotes says here, the pursuit of knowledge and truth is one way we can demonstrate our love for God. If we are to love God with all our minds, as Jesus instructs us in Matthew 22:37, one of the best ways we can do that is by reading. And it's not even just talking about the Bible. We should read the Bible, absolutely. But we also need to read books by pastors, theologians, women, people of color, just all different avenues of life. So that way we can learn, we can grow, we can be challenged, we can really kind of iron out the things we believe. And so I really love that day. And so I've been reading it. It's been good. It's not trying to make you feel good all the time, I should say. There's times where it gets you to be like, this, just face God, essentially. Be a man, face God, own up to things, and roll with it. Very brief way of describing the devotional. But hey, guys out there, if you're looking for a devotional, there's the other one. Oh, I guess I have 2 recos for this week. We talked pre-show about how I didn't have any recos, and here I've already named like 2 of them. Anyway, so that's what I've been reading. So fantastic stuff. Really enjoying it.
Good.
But Adam,
what was your book goal again this year?
35, and I'm already at 4 books for the year, so I think I set the bar a little too low.
Get it.
So I might be changing that in Goodreads to maybe 70. I don't know. We'll see.
That's quite the jump, sir.
Well, I mean, I read 64 books last year, so in comparison with that, it's not too big of a leap. But yeah, going from 35 to 70 is monumental. So I don't know. We'll see. We will see. And speaking of seeing, dear listeners, well, you won't really see this because you'll have to listen to it. But we're going to take a quick break. And after the break, we're going to dive into Persona 5, the history and reception development, our spoiler-free review, and then we're going to dive deep into the game, go into spoiler territory. But again, we'll warn you about all this stuff before we get into it. Anyway, stay tuned.
Have you ever watched a movie or TV show with your friends and noticed all kinds of symbolism, allegory, and Christian themes, only to have your friends shrug it off?
Well, maybe you need some new friends, but more likely, you need popcorn theology. I'm Richard.
And I'm David, and we're the hosts of Popcorn Theology, a podcast for movie lovers and theology nerds.
Each week, we dive into a different movie, TV show, or other topic and explore them from a biblical worldview.
Check us out on iTunes or your favorite podcast catcher, or at popcorntheology.com.
And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Welcome back, dear listeners. So for the topic of the show, for this episode here, we're going to be talking about Persona 5. Long time coming. We're finally getting around talking about one of the greatest games ever made. It's not as good as Persona 4 Golden, but we'll talk about that later. We're going to talk about it. Now, again, if you're new to these kinds of episodes, maybe you're checking us out on YouTube or you're checking out the podcast, kind of what we do with these shows is we go from talking about the development history to the reception after it's been released. And then we talk about, or we give our spoiler-free review for the game, and then we get into spoiler territory. So if you haven't played the game, or if you don't really care about spoilers, that's kind of your time to choose whether you want to jump out or not. And so we're going to basically talk about just the different themes presented in Persona 5, the worldview that it kind of presents, and come at it from a biblical worldview and kind of go from there. So without further ado, let's get into the history, the development history and reception of Persona 5. Now, the game is developed by Atlus for PS3 and PS4. It's the 6th installment in the Persona series, but it's part of the larger Megami Tensei series. So if that art style or just kind of looks familiar, that's why. Now, a brief synopsis for the story is the game takes place in modern-day Tokyo and follows a player named Protagonist after his transfer to the fictional Shujin Academy after being put out on probation for an assault of which he was falsely accused. During the course of a school year, he and other students awaken to their persona powers, becoming a group of secret vigilantes known as the Phantom Thieves of Hearts, who explore the metaverse, a supernatural realm consisting of the physical manifestation of humanity's subconscious desires to change malevolent intent from the hearts of adults. As with previous titles in the series, the party does battle with enemies known as shadows using physical manifestations of their psyche called personas. The game incorporates role-playing and dungeon-crawling elements alongside social simulation scenarios. That's from the Wikipedia article. As all this information is coming from Wikipedia, so dear listeners, I'll include a link to that if you want to read it at your leisure. As far as development goes, it started in 2010 with rumors circulating as early as 2008 during production of Persona 4, which, why would you speculate for the next entry in the series when one entry isn't even out? It reminds me when people would be like, Apple releases a new iPhone, and then like, okay, well, when's the next one coming out? It's like, dude, this one isn't even out yet. Why? Anyway, Hashino, the game's director, was brought on after Catherine had completed and considered it a test for Persona 5 for the team, which the team name that worked on this game is P Studio, which is an internal team within Atlus that's focused solely on developing Persona titles. Now, when production began, the team consisted of around 40 people, but later grew to 70 people, a total of 15 planners, 15 programmers, and between 30 to 45 designers. Early game designs included an action-based element in the combat that would introduce real-time elements, think Kingdom Hearts, the new Final Fantasy 15, but this was later scrapped to just stick in line with the traditional turn-based combat. Now, the negotiation system, which is a new feature for the series, was based on the idea that shadows were suppressed psyches and could be reasoned with. The hold-up feature inside the negotiation mechanic was based off movies where a character would hold someone up at gunpoint and make demands, which falls in line with the theme of rebellion and standing up for yourself that is presented in the game. Now, the story that's developed by Hoshino was focused on changes in society that he witnessed occurring in Japan at the time. And the characters have a sense of no longer having a place within society. They willingly embrace the strange phenomena going on rather than being dragged into it, which was a kind of series or a trope within the series. The main characters would get dragged into the paranormal phenomena stuff and kind of resist it, but then just have to go along with it. Whereas Persona 5, the characters just kind of were like, oh, okay, and they went along with it. Anyway, the original personas for each characters are based on various outlaws, and the game's villains and protagonists were parallels of each other, both being misfits trying to shape a world they saw as unsatisfactory or corrupted. This was intended to create ambiguity about the Phantom Thieves' actions, causing the player to question their concept of justice, which we'll get to a little bit later. This questioning extended to their mission as a whole, which was influenced by the way a vocal minority online could draw public attention to events and scandals in the news. And again, dear listeners, you can always find links to this stuff in the show notes. Just go to the Wikipedia article and you'll see a lot of the other development information. Now, the game released on April 4th, 2017, Adam. So it's close.
There you go.
It's close to a year. I mean, a couple months away, so it's close. But anyway, you said it took how long? 6 months?
Wait, when did you say it came out?
April 4th in the U.S.
What's that? I thought it got pushed back.
It got pushed back. It was supposed to come out September 2015, which it did in Japan.
You're right. You're okay.
Yeah.
I looked up release date and I saw September, but you're right because I played it during the summer, so we're good. Yeah. That's not bad.
Or I guess September 2016 in Japan, and then April 4th, 2017 in the States. Anyway, the game received a 93 on Metacritic, widespread acclaim, got a lot of perfect scores. PS Official Magazine UK called it a unabashed masterpiece, and the game was lobbied as the greatest JRPG of all time. So some of our dear listeners will probably vehemently disagree and bring up Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VII. But let's be honest, Final Fantasy VII is terrible compared to Persona 5. I'm totally joking. It's all right. Persona 5 is better. Anyway, the game did receive some criticism regarding the English localization. Polygon citing it was just kind of mediocre. And the game was also criticized for its portrayal of LGBTQ humans or people. People. Just because some of the scenes just kind of portrayed them as just kind of creepy. I don't know how to best describe it. If you played the game, you see it with Ryuji. It's several scenes that were played off for comedic effect. Anyway, you can check that stuff out online. So with that being said, Adam, let's brief synopsis of the game, brief development history, but let's talk about the game itself, man. Spoiler free, of course. What did you think of Persona 5?
Well, again, this is one of the few JRPGs that I've ever played. You are well known in the podcast group and Facebook group that you got me to play Persona 4 on the Vita. The biggest thing going against this game is that it wasn't localized for the Vita itself. So I did play the majority of this via remote play on my Vita, and it worked great. The great thing about this game is it's challenging, but it's not overly challenging. Now, I played it on easy compared to normal, which made it a little bit easier. I didn't have to grind as much. I think it took away a little bit because I remember beating Persona 4 and feeling like I had just accomplished a ton because that game was hard. Yeah. There were some tough bosses. This one I was able to go a little bit smoother through because I didn't want to have to do as much grinding. But it looked... graphics wise, it looked amazing. The bright colors, it really did the Tokyo, the Japan nightlife, all the different settings. It looked really good, and it looked really good on my Vita, even playing remote play. So that was something that was really good. the best thing, again, if you've never played a Persona game, one of the big gameplay mechanics is the social relationship dynamic, where it basically becomes a time management game of who am I going to spend time with? Am I going to work a job? Mm-hmm. What am I going to try to increase? Am I going to try to increase my kindness, my proficiency, my knowledge, all these different things. So you're basically managing your time and how you want to do that. It sounds like it may be boring, but for me, again, it's almost like a puzzle. That's why I really enjoy that. I love just what my favorite part of wedding planning was we did a seating chart. It was like a puzzle to me of, okay, who am I going to sit by who? I view it like that. And so I viewed the social relationship dynamics of Persona. It's almost like a puzzle. How am I going to maximize my time when I'm not in a dungeon? And okay, if I'm going into a dungeon, do I need to take a lot of healing things, a lot of SP potions or whatever, so that I don't have to exit it and waste a day? So all of those little things played like puzzles for me. So just on a purely, the gameplay side, it plays a lot like Persona 4, so much that a lot of even you got guys like Jack Frost, some of the personas get carried over to each one. And so that side plays very similar. That's kind of an entry. I'll let you kind of take over. What were some of your initial thoughts? I've got more to say, of course, but what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, man. Well, dear listeners, hey, if you love wedding planning, this is the game for you.
Yeah, if that's what you call it, I'm sorry. That is not what I meant.
No, I'm just ragging on you because I just thought that was funny. I've never really heard anything related to wedding planning and the word enjoyed being in the same sentence. Anyway,
well, I did wedding planning. I didn't really do any of it because I was 5,000 miles away from my fiance, so she did the majority of it. Mm-hmm. One of the few things I could do was that, and so I viewed it. It was like a puzzle.
Yeah, man. Well, that's gonna be stuck in my head. That's good, though. Yeah, so pretty much here's the thing, dear listeners. Y'all know me as the Persona guy. I'm the one that kind of banged the drum, so to speak, for Persona 4 Golden. And in a lot of ways, if you've played Persona 4 Golden, this game is very similar with some additions and some improvements. I really personally enjoyed the negotiation system. I thought that was very helpful in a lot of times, and the way that you could use that to get extra items. So if you're running low in a dungeon, you can actually negotiate or interrogate the personas you fight and get potions, things that help you recover status ailments, things like that. So it was very handy. It really came in the clutch in a lot of ways. As far as the story goes, I enjoyed it, like I said, until the very end, which we'll get to later in spoiler territory. But I thought this one was more exceptionally darker than Persona 4 Golden was. I felt like this one was kind of more in line with the previous entries in the series that are very much dealing with, just dark subject matter, heavy subject matter that you don't really hear discussed all too often. And we'll talk a little bit later about whether or not Persona 5 did that justice in some areas. But for the most part, very well done. I thought the English localization was actually not that bad. Some of the text was off in some places, but nothing really that ruined the game for me. But I thought the way that they just kind of opened the game up and gave you more areas to explore and more things to do was just really refreshing. And but at the same time, I almost felt like the game was a little bit too much. Something that I kind of lobbied against Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is that it just has too much. And in a lot of ways, Persona 5 has too much going on. To the point where, what I liked about Persona 4 Golden was you could finish your playthrough maybe, the standard 60 hours max probably if you're going for the true ending. But Persona 5, you're going to hit at least 100 hours just doing the main story. And it's a very daunting task. It's a very overwhelming game to pick up, or maybe not overwhelming.
Now that's if you're playing. I would say that's if you're playing on normal. If you're playing on easy, you don't have to grind as much. So that's a little caveat depending on. Well, if you go on a normal, you're gonna have to grind a little bit more. But you also said true ending, so
yeah. And I also switched over to easy part of the way through. I think it was the second palace. So even then, man, I was just like, good grief. Like, I was trying to get through the game as hard as I could, and I just hit 100 hours. I'm like, good grief, I don't know if I want to play this game again.
Yeah.
But I also put over 200 hours into Persona 4 Golden, so I guess I could do the same thing with Persona 5. But no, I can't. But yeah, so I mean, overall though, I agree with some of the outlets that have said this is one of the best JRPGs to ever be released. And I agree with that. It's very well built. The music's fantastic, which you guys have heard throughout this episode. The themes that they talk about are good for the most part in the way that they're handled. And the combat is just, I think I love turn-based combat. If you don't like turn-based combat, dear listener, I don't think this is going to steer you around on that, but I enjoyed it. Fantastic game.
Yeah, I think a couple, just kind of thinking through some of the things that you said, I wasn't a huge fan of the negotiation side because it was, sometimes I'm like, okay, I really want to capture this persona and I want to have it. But if how do you respond? They'd be, you have to respond the right way. Sometimes you get maybe an extra response. And if I lost it, I would be super infuriated. Like, dang it, now I've got to go try to catch that one, or it throws off the whole, strategy and the combat and the fight that I'm going. So, and it was so vague. There was 4 titles. They'd say, okay, they're irritated, they're timid, they're a couple other things. And you're supposed to try to counter those, but they never really gave you an idea of what that looks like. So you're it's kind of a guessing game of what are they looking for. So that was kind of frustrating to me at times.
I had forgotten about that. So that's a very good point. That's a very good critique of the negotiation system that they honestly could have made better. I agree. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I thought the mementos, that was... It was a nice little kind of addition to it. Some of the story side of that, I thought, you would have the one confidant. He would kind of send you into mementos and kind of hunt down those. I didn't think that was that bad. I think that sometimes, I'd have to really make up some space because I haven't been in the mementos for a while. But seeing the way that you can kind of get some extra items there, do some extra side story stuff, but also still be fighting, because once you completed in this game, a main difference is once you completed it, you weren't going back to really any palaces. You couldn't really go and grind or anything, so you had to do the majority of that in mementos if you were already out of a palace. So that was kind of one of the little differences there. One thing I thought the game was lacking was, I don't think there was one major lovable character like you had. Like in Persona 4, it was what was the little girl's name?
Oh man,
that everyone loved. There's that big plot twist towards the end of it.
I can't remember her name.
Whatever her name was, like everyone loved her. Just that lovable character. I don't think that any of the characters really in this one was that. What they did with some of the characters, was just bad and wrong, and I think that they kind of went against themselves, and maybe that is some of the Japanese culture against some stuff we'll talk about in themes that comes out, but they kind of swung and missed on a couple things there. Okay, they're trying to make this hard stance on X issue, but then 2 seconds later, they're going right against everything they were just kind of fighting for with this character or that character. So, but overall, I thought the story was well put together, and just kind of how they tied back into number 4 with Igor and the prison and the girls in there. So I think, when you first start the game and you hear that music, you're just kind of like, oh yeah, here we go again. Like, there was an excitement to that. So just the way that they kind of, the stories don't connect at all, but just that one, the Velvet Room and the way that it connects, like with the jailer and stuff, that was a nice continuation. That's like, okay, this is hitting home again.
Yeah, man. That girl's name from Persona 4, her name's Nanako, by the way.
Nanako-chan.
Yeah, man. Cute.
Every day's a good day at June's or something like that.
Yeah, every day is great at your Junes. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Gosh, that game's so good. Dear listeners, we did do an episode on Persona 4, which was like 10 episodes long because I kept bringing it up. You can check that out by checking out our backlog. But yeah, anything else that we want to add for the review section, or do we want to just jump right into the thing?
Again, and I guess we've kind of talked about this. If you are not, and I can say this because I am not a JRPG guy. If you've never played a JRPG, again, this game is very Japanese. It's anime. My wife, again, she's not a huge anime person. Oh, she's not an anime person at all. Let's just be real. Mm-hmm. She hated that I played this game, but this game got me playing. Persona 4 and 5 have got me interested in playing games that I have never been interested in before. So, again, the story side, the story aspects of it, the social confidant system, all those different things, I think it's worth a check out. So that's my last little review bit for it is taking this from a guy who had never played JRPGs before. I really enjoy these games. That says something to me about how special the Persona games are.
Yeah, man. I think two things I was going to add, just kind of talking about Mementos real quick. I forgot to talk about this during the development history, was they actually, the way that they do the dungeons in this game, because previous games in the series, they were randomly generated. So every time you went back to a dungeon, it was always different in layout. This is the first one where they actually built the palaces and they're kind of linear, but Mementos is kind of that, randomly generated dungeon that you could always go back to, and it was always fun to explore and grind. So as far as characters go, that, you said that there wasn't really one that you kind of really loved, or wasn't any quite on Nanako's level. Yeah. You didn't think Morgana or Futaba were on that level? Because Futaba was kind of like that for me, man. Futaba might have been the one who would get. I don't think Morgana was that character. Okay. Futaba maybe. Futaba is now that you bring it up, because if you think of like Anne wasn't really there. No. Ryuji definitely wasn't there. A lot of the other confidants, like they don't go into them as much. Mm-hmm. Makoto, she definitely wasn't. But if there was one, Futaba she's probably the most liked character overall by everyone in the game. Yeah. So she's kind of she's like a little sweetheart. She brings everybody together, makes it all lighthearted.
In the way, I mean, I think that's probably by intention. Nanako was the little sister. Futaba's kind of like that little sister character also. Mm-hmm. In the game, and so they all try to like guard and protect her also. So it kind of makes sense why that character is the likable one. Yeah. So anyway, that's about it, dear listeners. You can take Adam's reco on that. He's a guy that doesn't really play JRPGs, but even he says go play it. So take that for what you will. Now, that being said, we're going to dive into the themes of the game. So if you haven't played the game, or I don't know, if you care about spoilers to any degree, this is the part where you tune out, go put 100 hours into the game to finish it, and then come back to this episode. So again, if you don't want this game spoiled, now's the time to pause the episode, go play the game, and then come back. We'll be here waiting for you. All right? So 3, 2, 1, we're in spoilers. It's your own fault if the game gets spoiled at this point. We've warned you. So, Adam, good sir, can you believe that Godzilla shows up at the end of this game and just wreaks havoc everywhere? Like, oh my goodness, what a twist. Takes out Tokyo. Destroys everything.
I was not expecting that. And the way that they teased a new Godzilla movie and game at the... Oh, wow, dude. Amazing.
Crazy.
Fantastic. No, I'm kidding. So, Adam, this game deals very heavily with just kind of people's own perceptions of reality. In a lot of ways, it showcases what I would call the total depravity of man is on full display in this game, especially in the first palace that you go into, which dear listeners, if you've played the game, which hopefully you have at this point, I forget the volleyball teacher's name, but you see how he sees his students as just kind of his peons, his subjects, and he's the king of the castle, so to speak. And so he can do whatever he wants, even to the point where he abuses female students. And even, I mean, one student even tries to commit suicide very early on in the game because of this situation. Some really heavy stuff right out of the gate. And it just kind of keeps going as you progress in the game. So, Adam, let's talk a little bit about that, man. When it comes to total depravity, or really just even this first palace, man, how do we respond to that? How do we as Christians interact with that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, even before you get to the first, castle or dungeon or whatever you want to call it, you see it coming out in the beginning of the game. So how does our main character get into the situation that he's in? Well, he sees a man who's drunk, who's beating up on his girlfriend. And so the main character tries to intervene and tries to stop that. And it ends up getting him charged with abuse or something like that, or physical, some sort of for interacting and getting his nose in this other guy's business who was mistreating a woman. So right in the beginning, you get some of that. And then you see throughout, it's like, oh, because this guy had money, because this guy had power, even though he was in the wrong, he won the judgment because of those things: power, money, control. Mm-hmm. And the younger guy who had none of that kind of just got stuck because he was just a young kid. So as you move into the story of, okay, that's the starting, he moves to this new area, he's put under the control of this coffee shop owner, and then he starts, and throughout the whole game, you see that idea of, and I'll talk about this a little bit more of redemption later, where everyone, because he has a criminal record and because he did something wrong, everyone's just constantly beating him down. Whether it's this coffee shop owner at the beginning, it kind of changes later. His teachers, everyone's just constantly, you're basically worthless because you screwed up. Yeah. And so then when you get dungeon, so the first dungeon, it just continues. It's like, man, not only is you see it coming out in everyone's reaction with this person who made a mistake, but didn't really. He just got accused of it. You get into that with the first dungeon, and it's just like the social commentary. And I think especially even with what's going on, they say this is social commentary to Japan, but it's definitely not only to Japan.
Oh, no.
These things, not to the level in America, maybe that it happens in Japan. We're probably not totally aware with everything that's going on there, but there's a few more checks and balances in the system in America than maybe there is in Japan. But with all of the sexual harassment, sexual abuse things that are going on in the United States right now, I think as I was playing it was hard to play. Yeah. Seeing the way that they would, again, it led the one girl to trying to commit suicide. The way that one of my main issues with the game is the first one, they're looking at sexual abuse, sexual harassment, the idea of this coach having control over these girls and even guys to some degree. But they approach it from that perspective. And okay, Anne, she fights back and she becomes a playable character in the game, and her persona kind of unleashes because she's finally able to stand up to this coach. And it's like you kind of have this moment of great, she's standing up, she's fighting back against this abusive man, and we're going to destroy him because he's been abusive and harassing and all of these things. So you have that great moment, but then the whole rest of the game, they just over-sexualize the character that they had just kind of redeemed. So it's like, again, I talked about earlier how they were kind of fighting against themselves. If you're going to kind of have this moment where this female character, she finally gets her moment of redemption where she's not harassed, she's not going to be abused. But then in the whole next palace is like, hey, you should go and pose nude for this artist so that we can get to know him, so we can see if there's some corruption going on here. And then there's all of these just constant sexual jokes towards Anne directions, whether you can put her in a bikini, you can put her in this other scandalous outfit. I'm like, you had such a great opportunity, but I think it even goes back to what you're talking about, that idea of total depravity. Even when you're trying to redeem something, if you're not doing it from the right perspective, you're just going to keep following into that same cycle. So they tried to address it, but then even in trying to address that, they still couldn't help but keep failing because our culture is so over-sexualized, and they just kind of went against themselves. So it's definitely one of the problems in Persona is this idea of sexuality and harassment and abuse of, yes, we're going to fight against this, but even as you do that, you still didn't do it all the way, because even in your own sin nature, you couldn't help but, maybe it's sexuality is different in Japan than it is in America, but it still doesn't mean that it isn't wrong. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to, every chance we get in every cutscene, I think of one in particular on the beach where like the three girls come out and it's just way over the top on bikinis and where the camera angles are. And I'm just like, you're going against everything that you fought for earlier in the game, and you're ruining it all. You're ruining any type of foundation you had because you're still continuing it on. Yeah, it's not someone abusing and harassment, but you're just over-sexualizing women and making them objects and not people.
Yeah.
So
I think what I found very interesting about how Persona 5 handled that was that, in all honesty, and this is probably going to step on some toes, this is exactly how America acts towards this kind of thing. We decry, the objectification of women, but when you see a rap video or even a Justin Timberlake video where women are being objectified, we're like, oh, this is great. There's this disconnect, so to speak, where it makes no sense. We want women to not be objectified. We want them to not have to be afraid of walking down the street at night. We want them to feel safe and to feel protected in our society, at least here in the States. Yet you look around at the culture and it does nothing to help that. It does nothing to fix that. And even Julie Royce in her book talks about that with feminism, is that it's gotten to a point now where it just promotes misogyny. It doesn't promote feminism. And that's the frustrating thing about Persona, is that, yes, it's very frustrating how they did that. They gave this character her moment of becoming a hero and standing up for herself and basically saying a big screw you to the bad guy. Like, you're done. I'm not putting up with this. Yeah. And then it turns right back around to be like, oh, look at how hot she is. Look at her in a bikini. Ha ha ha. It's like, it's frustrating.
And they even make you choose, because there's one point as I was, we're going to have a couple articles that kind of help explain this a little bit more. But they brought up in this article how you just beat the dungeon and they're trying to talk her into going and posing nude for this artist. And she's like, do I really have to? Yeah. And your options are like, yeah, like you can do this, or like, are you sure? And then just like silence. Yeah. Like those are your three options. Like she's struggling with not wanting to do this, but the game is forcing it into the storyline, and it's forcing you to even almost be complacent and a part of that. And so just really going against, like what you said, we have a culture where we're fighting for all of these, to stop abuse, to stop harassment, to fight for women's rights and some of these things, and to bring justice to all the mistreatment that has happened. But you can't have that and then have a culture that is constantly pointing to, pornography, major part of why these things have happened and are happening. Well, we have a culture where pornography runs the day. Anyone can access anything. Guys, they don't have to just visualize or like in their minds. They can go and view anything they want, and everything is distorted. Yeah. Our minds, our hearts we're just distorted because people are seeing these things now. So it's a slippery slope of sin. And so don't hear us saying that we're not for these things. We're for justice. We're for women getting their day, and for these men who have been treating women poorly to find justice and all that, or like to be, to have that come out. But at the same time, like we said, you can't, like, that's why the hypocrisy of Hollywood is so crazy. They're on the front lines of all these things, which is good, but at the same time, they're feeding the systems to say, who are you to tell us that these things are bad? Yeah. Well, things that we're saying are bad are feeding the other things. So you have to have that holistic approach to stopping these things.
Yeah. And as always with these kinds of conversations, I think it's appropriate to say, like, dear listener, if you, male or female, if you've been abused or sexually harassed, please seek help. Please reach out to, your pastor or authorities and just get it out there. Talk about it. Don't let it have any power over you anymore, because you can overcome it. And the frustrating thing about this game specifically is that, I mean, you can't really expect it to come from a biblical worldview because it's not written by Christians, but that's the thing about the gospel, is that it can enable you to get past these hurts. It can enable you to be free from the bondage of this pain, of this suffering, of this abuse. And you see the character kind of come to terms with that, but then you see her just completely lose it all in the next mission.
Yeah.
But that's not how it is with Christ. I mean, that's one of the one redeeming things that I think of when it comes to Christ, is that when you're in Christ and you're going through and you're learning about the doctrines of grace and you're learning about freedom and you're learning about how God loves you and cares about you and respects you and ultimately wants good for you, it's so drastically different than what we see in the game, It's like God's not going to free you out of sin. He's not going to free you out of suffering. He's not going to free you out of pain, only to just completely contradict that later on.
Yeah.
So,
and I think I'm going to jump into the third one there, that idea of redemption that, as you talk about this redemption that we can have in Christ in this game, you kind of have this character, and I talked about our protagonist is he starts as a criminal, and that's what everybody views him as. He's going into school, everyone's talking about Augustman. Oh, that's the criminal kid. He's the guy that got busted with this. And so he goes from kind of criminal and outcast, but then depending on even what ending you get, he kind of develops into this hero. But even in that, it's imperfect. In all of these stories, justice is being made, but not true justice in a lot of ways. But in Christ, like you said, not only do you go from more than just criminal to hero. You go from criminal, enemy of God, and co-heir with Christ. And so you see a little bit of redemption in this. There's definitely not, there's not the Christ shadows or any of that. They're definitely not in this game, and I'm not trying to imply that one bit. But you do see some of that redemption by the end of the story. You see a lot of the friendships that go from having nothing to having like this close-knit group of friends. So that was one of the more encouraging things in the game, is like seeing this character and these couple characters, and even Ruigi, I don't know how you say his name. Mm-hmm. He was another guy who was kind of become an outcast in the school, but even he has his moment of redemption. So definitely one of the positive kind of storylines within the game. You see some of those redemption. Or then you even think of the coffee shop owner. He has his moment of redemption. So as you look throughout the game, there are many moments of, and each character that you kind of get, they're facing this castle, and they become a playable character at this redemption moment where they're like, I've had enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. And they have that redemption moment. And so it's kind of cool to see some of those as we talk about it now. More and more of those moments kind of come out for each character. That was definitely one of the positive aspects. There's definitely a lot of darkness, but there are also redemption in the game.
Yeah. And I think that's just kind of a neat little spotlight on just how life is in general. I mean, especially serving in church, you see the darkness that people put up with, that they live through. And one of the reasons why I personally really loved Futaba was because she's an introvert, she has anxiety, and in a lot of ways that character resonated with me, and seeing her kind of overcome those things piece by piece and with every situation was just kind of really cool to see, you know. I think Hellblade does it a little bit better, but just seeing Futaba go from this terrified, anxiety-ridden introvert to this maybe not so much outgoing, but this more like outspoken, like I'm going to stand up for myself and fight against what's wrong. It was a cool transition, you know. But the thing that I wondered, and I just lost it. So there it goes. Flying away. Anyway. Yeah, I really like that theme. That's one of the things that I liked about Persona 4 Golden is each character kind of had those moments as well. And I'm like, this is cool. You know, this is how you kind of write good, dynamic characters, is how they change and grow. I mean, like I said, like we just got done talking about, they're not perfect. You know, they definitely screwed some things up with some characters, but there are other characters that it's a joy to watch them change and see them overcome this stuff. So, but yeah. So, when talking about the Bible and just kind of our state as humans, you know, you kind of have to bring up this idea of our rebellion against God, or our rebellion against order, so to speak. You see this in Romans 1 that talks about how, you know, claiming to be wise, they became fools, and you know we've forsaken God and worshipped the created rather than the creator, those kind of things. And the true ending is this on display, cranked up to 11. Because as we kind of talked about a little bit earlier during the development history, is the personas, the palaces, they're all representations of a person's perceived reality. That's how they view things. But when it comes to mementos, this was constructed by that society's kind of subconscious, so to speak, to where, you know, if the overwhelming majority of the populace felt negative, then when you go on mementos, it's going to be negative. You're going to deal with a lot of just hurt, a lot of anger and things like that, and you'll see it come through. And you kind of see this come full circle at the end of the game when you encounter, and I forget what the name of the character is, but you see, you fight up against this false god, so to speak, or this god of order, as it's called. And this is what society perceives as reality, is that there's this god of order that has them in chains, that's oppressing them, so to speak. And so at the end of the game, it culminates with you and your crew fighting this god of order, so to speak. And it ends with you summoning the persona named Satanel, and you put a bullet through the god of order's head. And I remember when that happened, I sat there just kind of staring at the screen, trying to, what's the word? I guess kind of handle or process, thank you. Process what had just played out before me. And so, of course, I did some research, and apparently the game is really steeped in Gnosticism or Gnostic teachings. And so the god of order wasn't actually God. It was like another god that was pretending to be God. And I don't know. It's really confusing. Dear listeners, you can look that up on your own. But, you know, I remember finishing the game, and dear listeners, you remember if you've heard the episodes where I finished the game and was talking about it, I did not like the ending because I didn't like that perception. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, this is Romans 1 on display. I mean, when you think about it, a large part, at least our culture here in America, and I would even say around the world, tries to suppress the knowledge of God. And in a lot of ways, we rebel against God to the point where we just completely have nothing to do with God. And so in a way, we kind of, I don't want to say kill God in our mind, but we lock him away and we don't want anything to do with him. And that's exactly what happens at the end of this game. Is it's society's, it's the Phantom Thieves' way of saying we're rejecting this order and we're freeing ourselves to be who we want to be, you know. And so
Yeah.
I still don't like the ending.
Yeah.
I thought Persona 4 Golden's ending was way better because it didn't really go off the cliff, so to speak. It didn't go off the rails in such a absurd way like this one does. But now, Adam, I don't think you saw the true ending, but I mean, just hearing from that, just give me some of your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I went back and watched the video, but the thing that I missed is I didn't watch the last fight. I went through, I wanted to see the cutscenes, and so I saw the cutscenes. But even did you see the good ending? Did you ever watch it?
I didn't.
See, the good ending is interesting because in that one, so this all hinders on this choice you make with Igor, the jailman, the jailmaster, whatever you want to call him. There's a point where you're talking to him, and he gives you this choice of like, do you want to take this deal where you can, you'll still be able to access this metaverse, you'll still be able to fight crimes, you'll be this famous crime fighter, but I would still keep control. So you can either allow him to keep control, but go in and fight evil and fight all of these corrupt people and their personas. Like that's the good ending, not the, or bad, I guess good or bad depending on how you're talking about it. Ending of the game. And so that's the one I took, and it's where, okay, you kind of make a deal with this false god where you're going to allow him to have control, but you then have some power also. And then, but on the flip side of that is if you reject his and says, no, I'm going to fight against you, against this, that's where you get to the point of where, okay, he's this godlike figure. And so I think you're right on for, again, it's very much a social commentary of Japan, but I think it says, I mean, Japan isn't that much different from us in a lot of these things where how they view God. A lot of people here view God as, like you said, God has us in prison. There's nothing we can do. Mm-hmm. We're chained up. He's just holding us back. He doesn't want us to have any fun. All he's doing is trying to keep me down. Unfortunately, that's how way too many people view God. But if we could just get freed from God, if you look at the end, what do they do at the end of the game? Once they've defeated God, they go on a trip. They go out and they go and do what they want. He's no longer in jail. I can go off and do what I want, and there's no one. I don't have to worry about nothing. There's nothing holding me back. Unfortunately, how many people view that way of God? They view him as the one who's got them changed down instead of the one that can set them free. Instead of viewing sin and the enemy as, that's who's got me down, and Christ is that victor. Everything is flipped on its head. And I think this game very much has mentality is they've got everything flipped on their head. Yeah. It's not God that's holding us down, it's sin that's holding us down. We're not the one that's going to set us free. Only God can set us free. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with what I was reading. Okay, if I sin against man, I have people that can intercede on my behalf. But if I sin against God, who can intercede for me? Yeah. No one but God. God is the only one who can intercede on my behalf. And so this game is like, you got to do what you got to do to set yourself free, because you're the, you got to put it to God. You got to break away from God, and then you can go and have the freedom. But that's just not the way that we understand the world according to, a Christian worldview. Mm-hmm. We understand that, no, we're entangled because of ourselves, not because of God, because of our sin. That's what's got us in bondage. Yeah. But because of God's goodness and his grace and his mercy, he interceded on our behalf through Christ. And that's what gives us freedom. We're not in bondage anymore. No, we're set free. And so again, there's so much that we don't know about the Japanese culture, but enough I know about our American culture says that we, in many ways, think so much the same way, or not we necessarily, but Americans think very much the same way of, what's so good? He's keeping me down. He doesn't want me to have any fun. He wants me to only obey all of these rules. Yeah. When instead, no, he's to give you freedom from bondage.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of what you said is accurate, man. And I think maybe that's probably the reason why I don't like the game the most is that it's just how our society is on full display. And, we know that's not accurate, so.
And there's a lot of different themes. I mean, we could go through different character storylines, and again, that total depravity part that you hit. Each dungeon, there's just so much distortion, and I mean that's what the game is. These distorted realities. I think you kind of hit on that earlier. It's just not as it taken one step far, it's taken so far. It's so distorted. These personas that you fight at the end of each castle is just this major distortment of reality. And I mean, that's what our sin will do to us. It is a distorted reality. Mm-hmm. But again, we're not the ones that are going to fix that with ourselves. We can't fix it in and of ourselves. There has to be someone come to fix that for us. And so there's a lot in this game. That's what makes the Persona games so great, is that they are so complex and so deep. Mm-hmm. But you hate to see, of course, from our Christian perspective, we hate it when they kind of paint God. And we should hate it. We know what God's done for us. We shouldn't like that they depict God as the bad guy.
Yeah.
And Satan. Again, you defeat this God-like character, this false God, with a satanic depiction character.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So speaking of that, because I know some of our dear listeners are probably going to be like, well, how do you guys reconcile saying the game's great when it has that in there? I think I would answer that with, as far as storytelling goes, it's good all up until the end. Mechanically speaking, it's well designed and things of that nature. But I mean,
don't do the true ending.
Just don't do the true ending.
Yeah, just do the ending like ending. Me, and then you're like, oh, it's not that bad. You just kind of made a deal with this bad guy. At that point, hasn't really been revealed that he is trying to be this false god or whatever. So
yeah,
but
I don't know.
And I think these things can again, if you can't handle these type of games without them, it talks about, I think about these things when it talks of like not dealing with magic and some of these things. Like if you can't read books or entertain media without that really affecting, and some might say that it's going to affect you in some way, but all these things affect people in different ways. If this is going to lead you and give you a guilty conscience, don't play it.
Yeah.
I think this is why we try to do this podcast, where we're not trying to totally redeem this, but we need to think critically about these games. Okay, what does it say about our world? How should we interact with these things? So just as we interact with these different, storylines within the game, I mean, we have people that deal with this stuff in our group, whether that's counseling and working with people who have been harassed or abused, or, I mean, the game, we didn't even mention this, but there's this bullying aspect of the game that is so pervasive. I mean, we're all interacting with some of these things in some form. And so while this game doesn't like totally prepare us for this exactly, but it gets us thinking about some of these things in different ways. And okay, how can we approach these things, and how can I wrestle with them? And if a video game can help me process and wrestle with, even if it's to say that is wrong and that is sin, that can be beneficial. Mm-hmm. So again, don't go against your conscience. If you don't think that's something you should play, don't play it. But I think that we can try to find ways to redeem these type of stories, and that's what we try to do in the podcast.
Yeah, and that's kind of the nice thing about our show, is that we play these games that have these themes in them and these things, and so we have a discussion based around that, and we kind of interact from there, because we know you, the dear listener, some of you, if not most of you, play these games, and so what we want to do is help you. Kind of spur you on to good work, so to speak, to get you to think about these games beyond just, oh, it's fun. Well, why is it fun? Well, I don't like this part. Well, why don't you like this part? What makes it bad? Kind of go deeper than just, oh, I like this game, or oh, I don't like this game, or oh, it's fun. That's kind of our whole goal with this podcast, is just get you to think deeper about the games you play and to engage them from a biblical worldview. And so it's one of the things that, I mean, here, let's be honest, Persona 5 is one of the few games that talks about these real world situations in an artistic medium. And just saying, dear listeners, if you're a game developer or you're thinking about getting into it, you need to do that. Make some of these games that talk about these issues, but do it from a biblical perspective, so that we have a alternative, a game that talks about these issues, but offers actual hope, offers real sustenance, not just this you do you boo-boo kind of thing, you know. But anyway, so that's Persona 5, dear listeners. If you have any questions or if you want to talk about the game a little bit more, as always, you can hit us up on Twitter at TRG Podcast or talk about it in the Facebook group. But with that being said, dear listeners, episode 109 is quickly coming to a close. But before we let you go, some recos. Adam, good sir, what should our dear listeners check out?
I kind of mentioned this last episode that I wanted to hint at this, but I want to give it its due time. A book I highly recommend. I think I may have even recommended it last time, but I wanted to follow up on it. A book by Daniel Hill. It's called Wide Awake. It's the subtitle is An Honest Look at White. I cannot recommend this book enough. It was probably the book of last year that I read. It's an honest approach. He doesn't hold back any punches. He challenges us. It looks at, okay, as we become more racially awake and as we begin to recognize some of our sins that we have had in our past, not just personally, but as a white race or whatever, how do we move from awakening to action? And it gives a really good step-by-step. So I cannot recommend this book. I need to read it multiple times. I need to read it 3-4 times over. It does a good job at adding discussion questions at the end. So if you want to do a small group on it. So Wide Awake by Daniel Hill, fantastic book. Check it out. Also, by the time you listen to this, it should still be good because these deals don't really go away. Check your local Redbox. They have some really cheap games for $5. Final Fantasy 15 is $5. Doom is $5. Dark Souls 3 is $5. So again, it's just a game. But if you're looking for some cheap games, check out your local Redbox.
Fantastic stuff, man. I actually got my copy of Doom from Redbox for $5. Awesome stuff. Some of the dear listeners have gotten everybody's golf for $5. I mean, Redbox, dude, who knew? Redbox has good deals on games. Who knew? Not me.
Patience.
Not me. Anyway, dear listeners, my recos are, hey, John Ryan Riley, check your PMs because we need to know what platform you want your gift card for because you won the $25 gift card from last episode. So hit us up on Facebook. Treat yourself. So hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. Let us know what platform you'd like your gift card for, and we will get that sent out to you. But for my actual recos, Hellblade Senua Sacrifice for PS4 or PC. Again, dear listeners, if you're going to play this game, do some due diligence, as with really any game, and watch some let's plays, check out some parental guides, look at the game, see if it's something you can handle, something that you would want to play through, and something that you can personally handle. Otherwise, if the answer is no, you can't personally handle it, or you don't think you'd like it, then don't play it. Don't take that reco. However, the other reco I have, bros, guys, listening to the podcast, if you need a devotional for 2018, check out the 1 year daily moments of strength inspiration for men devotional. I have a link to it in the show notes, as well as everything else that we've talked about here on this episode. But as always, why not head over to iTunes, leave us a rating and review, let us know what you think about the show, let us know what you like, what you don't like, and let other people browsing the store kind of get an idea for the show, and maybe they'll check it out. Maybe they'll become a dear listener today. Or even on YouTube, hey, hit the subscribe button. Hit that little bell icon, and that way you are always notified when we upload a new video or episode of the podcast. But with that being said, dear listeners, you can always follow us on the reformedgamers.wordpress.com, our website, where we have show notes to all of our episodes, backlogs of episodes, and all that jazz. So if you missed an episode, you can always go back. We're trying to get those up on YouTube as well over at the youtube.com/thereformedgamers. Also, head over to twitch.tv/TRG podcast. Give us a follow. Let us, I don't know where I was going with that. Follow us on Twitch, so that way anytime we go live on the weekends where we're streaming a game, or you can always be notified for that as well. Again, I'm going to have some clips from our Fury stream earlier this past Saturday up on YouTube a little bit later this week. So by the time you're listening to this episode, they may be live. You'll just have to go check and find out. But as always, if you want to join the discussion, hang out with other dear listeners, join our Facebook group, please answer all 3 questions. Don't just put free Xbox gift code, or I don't know, just answer them like a human, I guess, not a robot. Don't be rolling up in there like the T-800 from Terminator and freaking us out. Anyway, You can also follow us on Twitter at TRG Podcast. And until next time, dear listeners, GG and amen.
You never see it coming.